Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Chris Taylor, and I am the advocate of the devil. They say that idle hands are the devil's work, and what better way to keep those delightful digits dancing than by playing video games? Slaying dragons, casting spells, killing bad guys. Hell, if you're the exact opposite of an athlete, like I am, you can even play sports. Times are good these days, with more games coming out than you'll ever have time for. And with technology evolving at an exponential rate, the things we play just keep improving as time goes on. But here's the thing. Maybe I'm just being an old man here, but I always have a lot more fun playing the games from the past. Now, I know what some of you are thinking.
New is always better.
But to be quite honest, that just isn't always the case. For example, the newer games these days, they're just too damn easy. Large-scale RPGs give you glowing dots to follow on your map to lead you to your next quest location. Action games like Assassin's Creed, a game that promotes itself as you need to be stealthy in order to survive, it just turns its combat into a hit the counterattack button to not die simulator. And lives? Forget about it! Games like BioShock just respawn you relatively close to where you died, with no penalty whatsoever, except maybe missing out on the achievement. In the old days of side-scrolling platformers, if you can't get past a level, you need to keep retrying and replaying it until you figure out the pattern that the enemies show up in and can get to the finish line. Nowadays though, if you die enough times, they just create a new way for the game to literally play itself. Now, I know at least one of the reasons why games have gotten easier over the years. The developers want us all to get to the end of them, to see every bit of hard work they poured into their creation, to feel the accomplishment of completion.
Something complete.
But there is something to be said about overcoming an actual challenge. I've mentioned before my disdain for participation trophies, getting a prize just for showing up. And as games have gotten easier, there seemed to be less effort needed to get to that finish line. Sure, there are some exceptions, but, well, those are exceptions. Compare that to things like Ninja Gaiden, or your first attempt at the water temple in Ocarina of Time. It's no contest. Overcoming those obstacles, to me, is a lot more gratifying. As technology has advanced, so too has the graphical output of these digital playthings of ours. Vast mountaintops, sparkling water, roaring flames. Games in the here and now have never looked more realistic. But does that mean that they actually look better?
My other one rule.
New is always better.
New is always better, exactly.
The problem with 3D images is that a couple of years later, it looks dated, old, not good enough. And that's why we keep getting consoles that push the graphical boundaries, but not improve on the gameplay. It's why developers focus all their attention on making their games as pretty as possible, but then we get buggy, glitchy messes like Arkham Knight that don't play properly. It's why we get remasters of games from the last console generation so that they look on par with today's games, but not nearly as much new things as I think many of us would have liked. Compare that to games like Donkey Kong Country, which, even as a 2D platformer from the Super Nintendo era, still looks gorgeous and plays like a smooth, silky dream. Back in the 90s, the graphical power of our consoles, while stellar for its time, wasn't nearly what it is now. So developers had to get creative with how their games looked, using 3D models on a 2D plane, or even something like Super Mario World 2. Which looks like it came out of a coloring book. These games still look fantastic to this very day. They've aged pretty damn well, even when placed next to current generation offerings, because somewhere, subconsciously, in the back of our minds, we know that something prettier and more vibrant is coming soon. And finally, there is one major thing that games nowadays have that those in the past are lacking: downloadable content. Before, the game you paid for was the game you got, and that was that. But now, we get bonus content, extra characters and costumes, new levels to play around in, extended storyline bits. All to drum up more cash after the fact. It's gotten to the point where we all expect it now. How many games in the last 5 or 10 years have been re-released a year or so later with everything added on after the fact? And at a reduced price, no less. Instead of paying $80 Canadian for the game itself, plus, depending on the game, another $40 to $100 on all the bonus stuff that they made after the fact, I usually wait the year or so it takes for the complete edition. And then, I only have to pay a third of the cost. Compare that to games from the 80s and 90s. New characters and costumes weren't purchased as an extra. They were unlocked through gameplay. You didn't have to buy expansion episodes for games. You could just take a different path or play through with a different character and experience your game in a new way. Now, I do love the idea of getting new things for a game after the fact, when it's done right. But then again, I'm also not the type of person that needs to own every new release the day it gets released. I just don't have time to play them all, or nearly anything anymore. But there's something to be said for waiting for a little bit of time to get a complete, full game, and not just the piece that the game companies decided to release and then dole out extra portions after the fact to keep people interested. Games from the past were a complete product. No re-release necessary, and they were good enough that just the simple joy of replaying a game, even if you do it in a different way, was enough to keep someone like me interested. A no Esper run of Final Fantasy VI, never use any healing items and blitz your way through of Silent Hill in an effort to get an extra ending. Playing Soul Calibur story mode with every available character to gain their endings and secondary costumes. There are pros and cons on both sides, but in my opinion, the pros of the older generation far outweighs the pros of current gaming. Despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, I do hope I managed to shed some light into why retro gaming is indeed a good thing. Whether it be in the feeling of accomplishment you get in overcoming a difficult obstacle, or just in the different ways developers had to make their games look to attract our wallets into making that crucial purchase. Games of yesteryear had to get creative in all manners of ways for us to invest our precious time in sitting down and enjoying what they had to offer. And while nowadays we can purchase add-ons to keep interest up for our games of choice, I feel like back in the day, getting a complete product right out of the gate and spending time going through every nook and cranny to find all of its hidden secrets was a much more enjoyable experience than just, well, waiting. As always, feel free to let us know in the comments below what you think. Am I just an old man wagging his cane at the youngins screaming, "Back in my day"? Which do you prefer, old school or new? By all means, bring up all of your points against my own, so that I may proceed to prove you wrong.
Kaboom! You've been lawyered.
But for now, in the case of retro gaming, the defense rests. Actually, not quite. See, this trip down nostalgia alley has reminded me of yet another way that retro gaming was different than it is now. Cooperative gameplay. Nowadays, everyone can sit in their own home and play against people over the internet. But before, we had to sit side by side, risking actual physical violence. So, since YouTube has a streaming feature, and I do love me some old school games, starting this Sunday and hopefully every Sunday moving forward, we here at The Devil's Advocate are going to be adding a new program, Couch Co-op, where me and my good buddy Dan Obichon, the guy that films this very show and makes me look pretty, are going to run through classic games that we grew up with. In the description below, there will be a link to our Facebook page and a poll of some of the games we have planned to play for your viewing pleasure. Whichever one gets the most votes will be the one that we go through together, so you let us know what you want to see. But for now, and for real this time, the defense rests.